Hello, my dear folks. Welcome to the show. Check out on East West with the G&E TV. It was exactly yesterday you probably saw me on this show talking about the Baltimore situation. And it was almost at the end we concluded that we, in our eye, believe that something was totally wrong, went very wrong, super wrong. Otherwise, we are not supposed to see what we are seeing. It was about an hour and a half ago, we heard from the press that the state attorney has officially pressed the charges on the 6 officers that was involved. And well, I'm trying to develop the concept from that instant to come create some kind of a new concept as versus, is there a contradiction between a friendly community and the law enforcement? I believe not. Well, anyway, to get to the point, I have invited my good friend, a very hopeful candidate for the city of West Covina, and then a veteran law enforcement member, a policeman, former policeman, lieutenant of
Sergeant.
All right, good. Sergeant, right?
Yes.
Sergeant. I'm sorry. I can increase that without having to pay you. Okay. For Santa Monica PD. My good friend, Joe Gardner. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Jack. Good to see you again.
All right, good to see you again. Especially in this very moment, I feel that I very badly in the need of talking to somebody who knows a little bit about law enforcement. So be you the man. Right? So you heard about the charges this morning?
Yes, I did. It was a pretty long press conference by the state's attorney, and as we now realize, those 6 officers that had anything to do with the transport of or handling of Mr. Gray are going to be prosecuted. So I think obviously people want to know that they have confidence in the administration of justice, and so. It would seem appropriate when somebody dies in the hands of the police, you know, a thorough and complete investigation has to be done.
Okay, of course, I understand where you're from, and of course, I believe you're a man of justice, all right, and you're a man of a judicial mind, right, judicious mind. Okay, now, there are charges of second-degree murder.
Yes.
There are charges of manslaughter. There are charges of assault. Right. There are charges of office misconduct.
Yes.
Right, things like that. And above all, the arrest in the first place was illegal. Right. So that about the 5. That's the 5 about all the charges. Right? So as a police officer, having served in Santa Monica PD for 27 years, if I recall right. What's your take about the charge? Okay, of course, they might have their own defense, right? But do you think the charge might have some ground, please?
Well, certainly, and we only know what we get from the press and what has been reported, but seemingly, though, there were some issues that were very concerning about how Mr. Gray was transported and how he became injured. And so, you know, I think it's appropriate probably that the state's attorney would come out early on this, because I think the community wants to know that they want to have confidence in the process. And as we know, there's been a lot of violence, a lot of vandalism in Baltimore, and I think coming out this early with the talk of charges, I think is going to probably, hopefully, stop some of that. But also we saw that there were a lot of looters and people who were opportunists who were taking advantage of this incident for their own benefit. So.
Okay. At the moment when they talk about the charges, when the press conference talked about the charges, they did not mix that with the riot itself. Right. The charges are the charges.
Right.
The looters, the arsons, they are criminals, so no question asked. Right. They're separate issues. There's orange and apples. Do you agree with me with that?
Yeah, I do. There was no in the press conference that I heard this morning. There was no talk about
that yes.
Or the violence or upheaval in Baltimore. The facts, according to the state's attorney, were the facts, and they're proceeding as people should expect them to.
All right, good. And lots of people say I'm quite surprised with the charges. And by that, they say that we do not mean that we're surprised by the charges itself. We're surprised by the fact that charges are so fast.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So what's your comment about being so rapid with the charges, please?
Well, I think obviously to some extent there was probably some expediting of the review, the preliminary review of this case. And I think because of the nature of the, now we learn as a homicide, and the fact that Baltimore is in turmoil, I think, they had to accelerate their investigation of this issue.
I see. So in other words, even though those are rioters and the looters and arsonists, so those bad guys, each of them, every single one of them needs to be charged with the criminality, right? Even though as that fact, we're still talking about it might play a role in the pushing for the rapid charges so as to help with the situation. Do you think that's a logic?
I think so. I would hope that they do the appropriate investigation from here on until their court appearance, because obviously, no matter who they are, they deserve their day in court. So they
of course,
should. Yeah. So I would hope that a lot of investigation takes place between now and then to assure that they put on an appropriate case.
Of course. And like they say, like the news also says that, they might have their own defenses, right? Yes. And they deserve their own defense to exactly say what they did at the time. But now you're looking at the charges, it's kind of like it's so much tilted that number one is a homicide. Yeah, that's the nature of the whole thing. And number two, with all these charges, with the 5 elements, so that really, if you combine them together, you smell something. It's kind of olfactory stuff yourself, right? So you know something's wrong. There's a lot of talk about discrimination of the case, right? And then even yesterday at the show with a friend of mine who's attorney, defense attorney, criminal attorney, we will use a quote from an investigation that finds out that 31% of those police shooting death happens to be black, whereas black population in the United States forms only 12%. So do you think somebody is trying to make an issue, or the issue is already there?
Well, I won't deny that there are probably forces out there who would like us to believe that there is a lot of discrimination going on. I mean, I don't know. There could be pockets of discrimination throughout the nation where, people are unjustly handled or have encounters with the police. I didn't see that in the agency I worked with, and there is a pretty high degree of professionalism here in California. There are standards, post-police officer standard in training in Sacramento that does a lot to promote proper training of police officers. And so I think, obviously when these incidents occur, there are those folks out there who will try to get us to perceive that there are some real problems, and perhaps there are in some areas, but not overall.
Yeah. I admire your take because once again, they might have their own defense, right? And number two, that throughout your own experience, you did not see that. Looking around you, you do not see that. As for what happens in Baltimore, it might be a different story. But one thing we might say, just for an amicable conclusion, that the possibility is there.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's always.
But it needs to be confirmed.
Yes.
The possibility is there, right? By that I mean I have to drag the whole conversation to your campaign at this very time for West Covina City Council, and he is, by the way, I know Mr. Joe Gardner for quite some time. He's a very low-key man, even though having gloriously served at Santa Monica PD for 27 years, he still plays his card low-key. Yet that doesn't mean he doesn't have a stronghold of that position, as his lines up as one of the most hopeful candidate for West Covina City Council. So I want to take a short break, very short break. When we come back, though, what I'm going to ask you is that how do you justify the balance between law enforcement and a friendly community? Does that necessarily mean a healthy community has to have a severe or brutal, or not necessarily that case, I mean law enforcement system? Okay, so stay with us, please.